Okay, we're back. Let's jump in. Let's do some really fun Warriors Kings talk because that game was something, man. Seriously, I was just like blown away watching it at the beginning because I was like, what in the world is this? This is
It felt like fast forward, like after watching the end of that Cavs-Knicks game. They just watched it at 1.5 times speed.
100%. That was insane.
Yeah.
I could not believe that happened. The Warriors win 126-125. Stephen Curry calls a timeout that the team did not have late in the game. My goodness, that's not something you expect from great players. Steve Kerr said after the game it was entirely his fault because he did not let the team know that they had 0 timeouts in overtime. He took the blame for that one. Yeah, I mean, as a coach, Adam, how do you feel about your players calling a timeout because you did not explain it to them?
Yeah, you always got to take responsibility if you're the coach. You leave every huddle in the final 2 minutes of a game. The last thing you say as you're breaking the huddle is how many timeouts you have. Whether you have the ball or you don't, you always remind them how many timeouts you have. So totally get that from Kirk.
Okay, so I will just give you the floor here.
Okay.
Because my brain was going a million miles an hour watching this game. At first I was like, oh wait, like they have nobody that can guard De'Aaron. They're doing a great job of like stringing De'Aaron out into advantageous matchups, and De'Aaron's really feeling it today. Fox ends up with 38 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists. Believe he had like 23 though very early in this game, and then later in the game, as the Warriors started to utilize Draymond Green on him a little bit more often, as the game started to get a little bit tighter. It felt like to me, to be honest, it was a little bit rough for the Kings. It felt like a team again playing their first true road games in the playoffs with this core. And I don't totally know how to react to that, given the fact that the Warriors have also been a terrible road team throughout the course of this year. They're the most experienced team in the playoffs. So the something that Jason Timpf brings up on Hoops Tonight, as people know, I'm a big fan of Jason. I've had Jason on the show a few times. Jason always brings up this idea that role players tend to play better at home versus on the road. They have a little bit more confidence. They can feed off the crowd a little bit more. We saw that with Kevon Looney, certainly in game 3 of this series. I think today it was just interesting to watch somebody like Kevin Huerter, who has really struggled throughout the course of this series in general, and to see someone like Harrison Barnes really not quite play up to the level that we have seen from them throughout the course of the regular season. So I'm very intrigued with what you feel about this Warriors Kings series.
Sure. Well, I got to give it to one Kings role player in Keegan Murray, who shot the crap out of the ball today and was
phenomenal. Was really, absolutely phenomenal. Keegan deserves a lot of credit. He had, I think, copped a lot of shit from Kings fans even, and from people around the NBA, just because Davion Mitchell has played so spectacularly defensively on Stephen Curry, wondering why Keegan Murray is continuing to start, wondering why Davion Mitchell is not just being purely minutes matched against Stephen Curry. I think Keegan shut a lot of people up today. He had 23 points, was very efficient. He just continues to be a guy that I think profiles well toward playing an offensive role in the playoffs, because he does not require many dribbles, does not require many touches to get his points as long as the shot is falling.
Yep. So I think of strategically playoffs and matchups being about trying to cut off the head of the snake, right? What are you doing against the main offensive initiators of your opponents? And I think what we've seen in terms of Steph Curry this series is that Davion Mitchell's done an unbelievable job on him, that when those two are on the floor, it's a pretty, I don't want to call it an even matchup, but nobody is going to do a better job against Steph than Davion in terms of just individual defense.
So I will say this. I think Steph is starting to figure it out in like a pretty real way. There were a couple of times where he back cut Davion Mitchell today because Davion was like way overplaying. I can remember one like vividly from the first half.
Yep.
He had that like ridiculous 3 in the first half that I don't even know how the hell that thing went in. Just like insane follow through shot. But like he got that little bit of separation from Davion finally. I think he's starting to like figure out the change of pace that he needs to use in order to just gain that little bit of separation by decelerating away from Davion Mitchell consistently. Davion's done great. I don't mean this as a slight at Davion. He's done a phenomenal job. I'm just saying that you can't keep Stephen Curry down for a full series. And I think he's starting to figure out Davion's aggressiveness a little bit.
100%. I think the point here is that Mitchell is probably as good of an option as you will find for anybody to just play Curry one-on-one if you can find that. I think defensively on the other side, the Warriors have finally found the right matchups and guys to be able to blanket De'Aaron Fox a little bit more, that it's a combination of Wiggins and Green, that you make him think and process who's where in terms of help defenders, as opposed to who's going to guard him at the point of attack. You have two guys that can move with him and have the length and athleticism to kind of crowd him, to contest those pull-up jumpers. But the game is very different when Draymond Green is off ball versus when Draymond Green is on ball. And I think De'Aaron Fox and the Kings have to slow down and think just enough to try to account for where that is. The other side of things is with the second overall options for each team, right? And tactically, I think the Warriors had that unique strategy coming out of the game with putting Looney on Sabonis and then sagging really far off of him and kind of daring him to take those mid-range jumpers. And Sabonis was really patient and strong and kind of bullied his way to get Looney buried under the rim. He probably traveled 2 or 3 times that weren't called. Like, it happens. We'll move on from that one. But I think it's very interesting to see the Warriors be able to toggle Looney and Draymond Green onto Sabonis, and now toggle Wiggins and Draymond Green onto De'Aaron Fox. That in the fourth quarter, this is going to be about how Steve Kerr chooses to weaponize Draymond Green the most on the defensive end of the floor. And if he can push the right buttons at the right time, they can slow down the Kings and muck up the game on that end of the floor. Muted there, Sam.
Well, and what's been interesting to me is typically that the Warriors prefer, it feels like, I was talking with an NBA executive about this. I'm sorry now that I'm a little bit scramble brained. There are different ways that you can utilize having a non-offensive player on the court if you are a defensive team figuring out how to guard them, right? You can do what the Knicks are doing with Jalen Brunson and hiding Jalen Brunson on guys like Chetty Osman, Isaac Okoro, etc., right? Or you can proactively have an elite level help defender, for instance, like in game 2 of the Memphis Grizzlies Los Angeles Lakers series, where Jaren Jackson guarded Jared Vanderbilt in that game and just flew around everywhere in help defense, right? The Warriors tend to like the more proactive strategy with Draymond Green. They tend to like to have him on a non-threat offensively and just let him be an absolute menace flying around defensively, right? The difference between being proactive defensively versus not necessarily reactive, but using it more to hide your best offensive player and not necessarily getting that elite level defensive value from a great defensive help player who has elite level instincts like Jaren Jackson, Draymond Green, etc. The Kings just functionally with their lineups don't have a lot of guys that you can do that with. You can do it with Davion Mitchell when he's on the court. Davion has at times hurt the Warriors in this series. Today he goes 5 for 8 from the field, 1 for 2 from 3. But for the most part, the Warriors are going to be pretty good with putting a good help defender on Davion Mitchell. But when he's not on the court, there's no reason not to have Draymond Green guard De'Aaron Fox at that point, right? because he is laterally quick enough and long enough to at least bother De'Aaron. I don't think you're going to stop De'Aaron. I don't think they have anybody like fast enough and, good enough at containing dribble penetration to completely keep De'Aaron out of the paint. But I do think that ability to kind of mix and match Draymond Green is intriguing in how this series is going to play out moving forward.
Yeah, it's a really important chess piece for Steve Kerr to be able to play with late in games there. This is a huge Andrew Wiggins series too. He has been a major difference maker with his energy on the defensive end of the floor. The way he rebounds the basketball is incredibly important for the Warriors as well. They look so much different now that they have Wiggins back, and he's playing really well. So quick shout out to him for being able to quickly come back into the lineup and rotation and be as good as he has.
I'm glad you brought up Wiggins, because Wiggins does deserve just an immense amount of credit. Andrew Wiggins right now is averaging 19 points and 6 rebounds, shooting 49% from the field. He's only shooting 29% from three because he shot that 1 for 8 game in game 1. But over the course of the last 2 games, 3 for 6 from three, 1 for 2 from three. Wiggins is the big factor for them. Because again, if you want to play Draymond Green off the ball, you are then able to slide Andrew Wiggins onto the ball to bother De'Aaron Fox in a pretty real substantial way. Having Wiggins is what Klay Thompson used to be in some ways, right? They used to love playing Klay Thompson on these lead ball handlers. He's just not quick enough anymore after the unfortunate injuries that he has suffered throughout the course of his career. But having Wiggins now allows you to weaponize Draymond Green, allows you to weaponize Kevon Looney in a pretty real way defensively. And that is where I think they're going to get a real advantage here moving forward against the Kings. But I'm glad you brought up Wiggins, because Wiggins, his transition defense is phenomenal. His off-ball defense is really, really improved over the course of the years. And he's obviously an awesome on-ball defender. I would love to see him make an all defense team at some point. Like, I think that would be a reasonable, rational thing to happen. I don't know if he will. This year he certainly didn't play enough games to get anything resembling votes for it, but he's that kind of defender now to where I think that is a real potential outcome for him. And he just deserves an immense amount of credit for it, because back in Minnesota, people used to complain about his defense for the first 3 years of his career. I think he got way better by the end of his career in Minnesota defensively than what people recognized. They started to use him more as a point guard that was initiating the offense, and then they'd start to use him a little bit more as a point of attack defender at times, also getting him engaged in the game a little bit more. And I think that really changed the tenor of Wiggins' game in terms of aggressiveness and just overall engagement level. But I think it was happening before he got to Golden State. I think that Golden State has weaponized him in a way that they deserve credit for, but Wiggins deserves credit himself for being willing to be a lower usage player, continue to take what's given to him, and embrace this role of being a great role player on a team that has won a title and a team that certainly could win a title this year. The West is wide open, and this series is now 2-2 going back to Sacramento.
Yeah. So Wiggins has been awesome. Like, it's been so fun as a series. And generally, when you have the pace that these games have and as many 3-pointers that are being taken, in some degree, it's going to come down to who makes more on any given night and who ends up just being able to push the tempo a little bit more in their favor. But one thing that stood out to me in the earlier part of the series was how well the Kings were prepared to guard Golden State's type of action and motion. And that should be no surprise because of Mike Brown, Sacramento's head coach, his familiarity being an assistant with Golden State for as long as he was. I thought Game 4 was really the first time we saw the Kings fail to stick with Golden State in some of the simpler actions, or I guess more of the staple actions that they run in terms of split cuts and just dribble penetration and extra ball movement. Really, that's where the advantage came to me for Golden State later in this game, particularly in the second half. Draymond carving guys up on split cuts as a facilitator in those areas. Yeah. And then just a lot of extra passes that the Warriors were able to make to keep the Kings in rotation and get wide open shots.
Yeah, the Draymond facilitating factor is an enormous part of what happened today. As you mentioned, just his comfort level off of those split cuts are just so important to what the Warriors do. And again, it's why to me the most important part of what Kevon Looney brought in game 3 was they didn't do it off of a ton of split cuts necessarily, but just that ability to make plays and find open passing reads within the flow of that offense. People forget Kevon Looney came up as like a point forward in Wisconsin and then went to UCLA and was essentially like a 3-4 hybrid that would grab and go on the break and do stuff. Kevon Looney has that skill set. He was very similar to, what Draymond Green did at Michigan State in the later years of Draymond Green at Michigan State. So Kevon has that skill set, but it's a different beast when it's Draymond out there. It's just an entirely different ball game. And I think that, I still feel pretty good about the Warriors. Now the Warriors have to win a road game. The Warriors have not won many road games this year. They are, I believe, something like 11-30 on the road this year. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they're necessarily going to be able to do it. The one thing I will bring up, though, that I think is a critical part of this series now is Domantas Sabonis. Now, Sabonis, I think, has struggled in space defensively with a lot of the different actions that the Warriors will run. It is a little bit more difficult for him at times. But I also think it's interesting that early on in this game, it felt like he had really developed that post skill and that like post feel for how Kevon Looney was playing him, and started to like really use the number of like little up fakes and all the like footwork shit that he does in order to get Kevon Looney a little bit off balance. But by the second half of this game, there was nothing available for Domantas, it felt like, in the post. And I think that's a big piece of this because Domantas Sabonis often acts as a real bailout option for the Kings offensively, especially when the 3-point shot is not falling for them. Tonight it did. They shot 40% from 3. This is why they dropped 125 points. You're not going to get 40% from 3 every night. They're going to need Sabonis to step up and be that effective, efficient bully on the block that we've seen him be previously in order to win this series, I think. And thus far, it hasn't been a terrible series for Domantas. I just don't think it's been quite like, look, he's going to make third team All NBA this year, like almost undeniably, right? But so far in the series, he's averaging 16 points and 12 rebounds and shooting 48% from the field, and actually is turning the ball over 4 times per game. That's just not quite enough production from a guy that is going to be an All NBA player this year.
Yeah, you got to find ways to get him going, and I think we all know what De'Aaron Fox, Mr. Clutch, is going to bring to the table. Unbelievable pull-up shooter at the elbows right now. Such a threat in transition to be able to get to the rim. He's taking threes in high volume. I think the Warriors have been disciplined to not send too much pressure against him on the perimeter because Sabonis is as dangerous as he is in the short roll or as a creator if he's got a 4-on-3. So they've got to find ways to get the ball in Sabonis's hands with an advantage, attacking a non-set defense. And to me, if the Kings can do that, they're in good shape.
Fascinating series going back to Sacramento. Genuinely, I think it's like 51-49 either way in terms of the way this thing goes, because the Kings have had real offensive success now against the Warriors in 3 out of 4 games in this series so far. I don't think the Warriors have had like a great answer for stopping the Kings yet. I know that we talked a little bit about the success they had in the second half of this game. I mean, they still gave up. What did they give up in the second half of this game? It was something like
too many.
Let's see here. It was only 56. It was a little bit better than what I thought it was in the second half. They did play. It felt like they played better in the second half, and that ended up being borne out in terms of the scoring. So we shall see moving forward with Sacramento Kings and the Golden State Warriors.